Siskel and Ebert and the Movies explore the films fans make into cult films. Next on Channel 9.
Welcome all to the show. I'm your host, Sully. Here with me, Slycast, and a big part of the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network is none other than Craig Cohen. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. When I saw that you were going to be talking about this topic, I was like, man, I would so like to be a part of this. So thank you for having me.
Craig's done it all. He's worked as a police officer. He's also previously hosted Camel Clutch Cinema, the Tricorder Transmissions, as well as Big Screen Book Club and Jack Rabbit Slims. He is just all about town, just loves to roundhouse kick various movies he loves into the public domain. And I was just like, we're going to talk about some variety show. You know, I've seen everyone mention Roger Ebert, but has anyone actually gone into detail on why many people just flocked to their review show every day? Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, that. And people forget they started out on PBS in the 70s. I didn't have the treat of watching that, but I just would always just see reruns of his show throughout the 90s and 2000s. And I was just like, see, these guys get it. And I think so many just flock away from them just because they disagree with the review. I'm like, yeah, but listen to their style in which they're summing it up instead of getting distracted by their personal preference, how Gene doesn't like particularly violent movies or slashers, and how Ebert gets caught up in too many nitpicky details or not enough detail. He destroys a movie based on that. So how about yourself, Craig? Early in the morning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, one thing that, when you talk about things pre-internet, there's certain listeners that don't have a life before the internet. They were born at a certain time and they grew up with the internet. But for people of a certain age, especially when it came to movies, and you can say music as well, I mean, the way you got information was really limited. It was either, reviews in your local newspaper or by your local, news critic, or on a national level with the syndication of Siskel and Ebert. So, I remember if I wanted to learn about Superman 2, the only way I could do that was either to go buy the Superman 2 collectible, magazine that was on the grocery store shelf, or watch Siskel and Ebert, because they would show clips from it. So
there you go.
Now you can go online and just watch, clips from movies before they come out, as the studios release them. But all that, was a lot harder to find back then. But the one thing I really sort of appreciate about Siskel and Ebert now is that you did mention that they had certain sort of traits, but they weren't always like they weren't always stringently attached to those. Sometimes, Siskel would give a weird review where you'd be like, wow, I didn't expect that from him. And the same for Ebert,
Yes.
And I think the one thing I learned from them that probably helped me in like my podcasting life was, the ability to sort of discuss films, but also be able to disagree about films without getting nasty with each other.
Yeah, pre-internet, before everyone just seemed to want to just have it out for each other, and you're just like, really? We're going to do this right now?
Yeah. And I think the other fascinating thing about it is that those guys were originally competitors. They were at rival newspapers in Chicago, which is just wild. So, there was probably
unheard of, kind of.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, professional rivalry or what have you. And I'm sure that sort of helped sell the concept. It's almost like pro wrestling at that point.
It's I like that parallel. See, this is why I like doing shows like this. It kind of got me in that same mood. It's like, ooh, I wonder if they love this.
Like they kind of leaned into their gimmick a little bit of being rivals.
I think him and James Berardinelli, I especially look to the most. It's like, I want to get their take. Versus now where everyone is just kind of in instant like acceptance or reject. Oh, finally you get me. Oh, you don't get it. It's like, well, why not just see why there's a difference of opinion instead of just, like, how dare they? It is interesting how, like you say, it was kind of a show off what they know about the movie, why they react to it a certain way. And yes, having the actual magazine background really did help, because you actually trust them, and it seems like every other article I've read is becoming a movie critic isn't even easy to begin with. Like half the time it just seems like they just pick the first person on their staff who just volunteers.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I definitely think that their background definitely helped them when it came to being on TV in front of a camera. And I think that's also like one of the things that kind of worked for it is, nowadays critics are either just a byline on an internet site or, a YouTube critic. And the thing about Siskel and Ebert is they were like just two normal looking guys in a time period when like a lot of normal looking people weren't on TV. You had guys like John Tesh on Entertainment Tonight, or, just, people that didn't look like normal people. And I think that helped too. It kind of gave them a bigger appeal. I don't think there was anybody that looked at them and said, oh, those guys are, hoity-toity or, too intellectual. I mean, I think they had an ability to speak intelligently about film, but at the same time, deliver that sort of message in a way that the everyman could understand and appreciate and not feel like they were being talked down to.
That's a good point, because I definitely never got a talk down to tone from them. I think that's why they opened up so many barriers, and it seems like so many other times you just still, I mean, it's good to have difference of opinion, but you still see so many people go for like an opposing kind of competitive nature. This is like, I don't know why everyone it feels to me more like a reality show when you're trying to do a review show like that. It's more fun when you just want to pick other people's brains on why they are that way, instead of, well, oh, they're going to hate this. Oh, he is going to love this. It's like, it's kind of more fun being kept in suspense.
Oh yeah. And that's the other thing too, is you weren't always 100% sure which way they were going to fall. And like you said, they had their sort of tendencies, but sometimes they would, subvert that and surprise you. And, in the past couple of months, I've been watching, whatever reviews I can, find on YouTube. And there's also a website, SiskelEbert.org, that's got episodes. And, I'll see that they're going to talk about a movie and I'll be like, I wonder I think Roger will like this and Gene won't, and then they'll surprise me and they'll either both like it or one of them will like it and the other won't. And it's interesting to see sometimes when they subvert what you expected from them. The other thing that is really cool about them is they sort of became like these, celebrities. I mean, they did a lot of appearances on David Letterman's show. And they truly became, sort of household names. And for the longest time, Ebert even had like his movie guide that would come out, I think, every year, which was,
I lost track of it so many times, but
yeah, it was like a print version of the IMDb.
Even when it was, negatively titled, like, I hated this movie, you just had fun kind of engaging it because, yeah, it's like, why did this movie set him off? Why did this make him want to leave the theater? And he would always fess up. You see so many people who are kind of infamous because it just doesn't sound like they stayed in the theater, like Rex Reed or what have you, getting very key details of the movie wrong. And he's pretty good about just like fessing up, like when he was watching something like, say, Death Wish Free or Spice Girls movies or Armageddon. He's like, I wanted to leave. I will leave.
Yeah.
Instead of just acting like I stayed the course. But he also, like you say, yes, he would go on the various talk shows and sometimes he wouldn't even be talking about even movies or anything per se. He just would just go into detail on, like the essence of comedy or talking about the other colorful guest stars that were on that talk show.
Yeah. I remember one time they were on Howard Stern and Ebert was talking about the McDLT, which I don't know if you remember that at McDonald's. It was like a split. It was like a split sandwich. It came out in like a hot side and a cold side, and then you would put it together.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a whole, probably a couple minutes where Ebert talked about his love of the McDLT.
He really did. And he would use metaphors kind of like that, kind of like movies are what you eat,
But it's interesting you mentioned Armageddon because I guess controversially, two of Michael Bay's movies were released as part of the Criterion Collection in the early 2000s, The Rock and Armageddon. I think most people would argue that The Rock is a legitimately good to great action movie. I think a harder argument would be made for Armageddon, but Roger Ebert wrote the liner notes, if you will, for that DVD release. Basically, it's been a while since I've read it, but basically defending its inclusion as part of the Criterion Collection. And it's cool to see a critic go to bat for a movie like that because nowadays, critics are worried about sort of
reputation.
Yeah.
What everyone else thinks of you. And I've had to always, it's getting harder. There's always that one Slim Jim who kind of comes in and just is like, oh, only these kind of people like this kind of movie. It's like, well, that's not necessarily true. That's been proven time and again. You don't have to be bright or dumb to necessarily like something like Fast and Furious or Transformers or even Expendables. It's just you either like it or you don't, and you just give a reason why it appeals to you. And like you say, he really would go into all kinds of movies. I love how when he was told that he should have re-rated The Godfather, he gave it like a 3 out of 4 at the time of release, and he was like, no, for historical preferences, that's where I was before it became considered one of the best movies of all time. For me to take away that review, that would be a detriment to film history. Like, that's not how I thought at the time, and I want to give people an idea of where we were at that moment before a film inevitably gets reviewed and reevaluated, considered a underrated classic. It's interesting how, like you say, he kind of tackled multi-platforms all at once and could just be a very funny guy. I always lost track of how many times he was just distracted by a lead actress's beauty, or just noting just all the various things. He especially loved crime movies. I noticed a lot. He would just be like, see, this is all dense and everything. I love his review of Falling Down, where Gene is just very appalled by it and just finding it just a violent mess. And he's like, we've seen movies like this before. And this Ebert just pipes up. He's like, no, Gene, not from this perspective.
Yeah.
Not from a retiring cops aspect, not from a unhinged, disgruntled worker perspective.
Yeah, and another thing I really liked about it is a lot of times it would just be like they'd reach the point in their coverage of a particular movie where they're like, okay, we're just going to agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah, and he would fess out when they did the end of the years. Like, either be like, yeah, if I when they were doing like their best and worst of the year, I think it was like 95. He was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and side with you on this. Siskel. I liked Waterworld okay, but it's probably a year's worse. Just I wouldn't like it now, probably like I did when I saw it at whatever screening. And it, like you say, it's so rare for a critic to just kind of analyze their pros and cons, or whatever mindset they got to be to embrace a movie, because it does make a better and just more accessible viewing experience when you can just admit your humanity instead of act like I'm, a giant corporate, magnet, and I must say this or that on time. And when he saw Unforgiven, he admitted, he had been able to go to a early critical festival screening, and he understood it way better for when actually going to the mainstream release of it. And he was like, some movies do require multiple viewings, and this is one. I like it better. It's still not an easy viewing, which is so weird because this has themes that I've accessed before. So I like that too, just analyzing, hey, this has something that should resonate with me, but for whatever reason, it's not clicking right away. But I can't deny that it is hitting most of its mark and doing its job very well, regardless of my relationship to it. So that's hard to do too. But there's so many movies we'll watch and was like, okay, so objectively, very well made. Subjectively, it's kind of irking me.
Yeah. And I think that's also I think that's also a valuable tool in terms of understanding why you may like or dislike a movie. And I think Siskel and Ebert helped in that way a lot, because maybe you saw a movie and it just didn't sit with you the right way for whatever reason. And to hear, the two of them talk through it, sometimes it would help you understand, or it would help verbalize something that you couldn't internally verbalize. And I think that's ultimately why anybody, will go and, search out other people's thoughts on movies, is, to maybe help you better understand a certain aspect of it.
Oh, totally. Because, and the at-home books were definitely helpful. I definitely never really got that from Leonard Maltin's books. It just seemed like, you would see interesting stuff in the video guide, but in all fairness, I would sometimes just kind of read them, and I got way more from them just when seeing him kind of do those various like anniversary VHS tapes of certain movie classics that he would talk before the presentation, like High Noon and Little Rascals. But if Ebert was featured on a video program or a special featurette, you could tell he was ready to go to town. He was ready to sum up a movie's reputation, newfound love, and kind of in a way, just analyze why it's still being talked about right now.
Yeah, I think they're kind of going away, but there was a time where DVD or Blu-ray commentaries were very, very popular. People would buy movies on DVD for the special features. It's kind of becoming a lost art, I think, where people don't really care about that as much anymore, especially if they're buying the movie digitally from Vudu or wherever else they may buy it. But if you look at the list of the greatest commentary tracks of all time, a lot of people will reference the one that Ebert did for Citizen Kane. And again, sometimes that's better than having a director sit down and sort of pump up his film for 90 minutes or not really give you much insight into why they did what they did. There were plenty of DVD commentary tracks I listened to where they were sort of just either recaps of the movie or they were just promoting their movie or promoting how great they are. But to have a sort of critical mind, sort of working through what's considered one of the greatest movies of all time with you is kind of a cool treat. And I do know that after Ebert got sick and lost the ability to speak, all of the hundreds of hours of audio of his voice that had been recorded over the years, they were able to give him his voice via a computer, which I can imagine was a great gift for somebody that was so used to speaking. You had mentioned the starting out on public television. It dates back all the way to 1975, which is way before my time. I didn't realize that it had started back on a show called Opening Soon at a Theater Near You that I think it ran 75, 76, 77. And then they turned it into sneak previews. And then I think it eventually became At the Movies.
It's mind-blowing because we're just so used to him for so long, and I'm sure people of later ages, they probably just knew him as, oh yeah, the TV talk show guys who were up after midnight. It's like, no, they've been around longer. And did you ever have pals and family who kind of didn't really care for him, and you kind of felt like you had to kind of go into your own critic mode where you're now defending the critic in there?
I don't think so. I mean, I think in my immediate circle, they were pretty well received because again, it was either a way to sort of see clips from movies that you wanted to go see, or the simple thumbs up or thumbs down
that
would sort of be an indication to my dad on how how to spend the family's money. Oh, well, Siskel and Ebert both gave it a thumbs down, so maybe we'll pick something else to watch. And I think that's another thing that I think is really sort of innovative is there's a lot of times where you read a review of a movie, Sully, and you don't really know where they fall on it.
No, it's so cryptic. Like they couldn't make up their mind, and they just filled out the next 5 paragraphs with clutter. And you're like, so did you like it or not? Is it a 2 out of 4 star? Could you at least put the star rating there so I can not be in suspense?
Yeah, but I think the thumbs up and thumbs down rating really made you put your neck out and say, go see it, don't go see it. And I think that's another sort of innovative aspect of that review style. And I don't know if the show would have been as successful as it was had they not come up with that simple thumbs up or thumbs down conceit.
I don't think so either. And lately I've been seeing a lot of horror movie fans kind of attack Ebert when they seem to be mixing him up with Siskel, who wasn't crazy about slashers, when Ebert was pretty open to various movies like Jaws and Gremlins, even Poltergeist type films. And he just I think a lot of people, if they see a negative review of his film, they just assume, oh, he's behind the times, oh, many people didn't like it. But if you actually read any of his reviews, he almost always acknowledges, hey, I'm pretty sure this is going to find an audience. Everything has an audience, but this I don't find appealing because of points A through C. And he liked movies that weren't too derivative and where he had a variety of just themes to kind of dissect through, to where he's like, you know what, I'm going to the next showing at 5 p.m.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is there was always sort of an acknowledgement of at least whether or not the movie was well made,
Yeah.
and they could say, it's a slasher film, but it was either unique in its approach, or you could tell that it was, written well, directed well.
If the tone was off, he would say something like that, like in his Predator review. He's like one of the few critics who acknowledged it at the time, and he's like, this is a Friday night slugfest.
Yeah, and
how
I
else
think
would you want him to describe it?
Yeah, and I think that's fair when you're assessing a movie. Not every movie is going to be Best Picture of the Year nomination, and if you temper your review with that understanding that this is slot, garbage, or it's fast food entertainment, it's a popcorn flick. Yeah, I always think that they were fair in their reviews. I mean, I by no means did I always agree with them, but I always thought they were fair. I mean, I don't think they ever went into a movie with, real any kind of prejudice or anything like that. And again, I think ultimately sort of the way that I think about critiquing and analyzing films is definitely influenced, by watching Siskel and Ebert as a kid talk through ideas and concepts and themes and things like that. And
it'd be hard to find anyone who hasn't, even people who are like, I want to be the opposite of Siskel or Ebert. It's a bit of it is in all of our bloods. That is totally sure.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US. We are in the UK. We are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Welcome aboard. Partner in crime, John. How are you, buddy?
I'm good.
All righty. So we're in the thick of it. We are talking Gene and Ebert's various themes. How long have you been an avid watcher of their program?
We actually start with me with Ebert Roper. That's what introduced me to Roger.
Okay, so you went in reverse.
Yeah, I did.
When and that's a kind of a good segue too. Craig, did you always kind of feel like Richard was able to kind of recreate some of Gene's various camaraderie, or was he kind of a different animal altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was his own person for sure. And I never really got the feeling that he was, trying to replicate anything. And
no,
I think, they fell on different sides of the fences enough that they were able to sort of at least maintain that, that healthy sort of debate. Siskel that Ebert had with Siskel.
Yeah, I got less debate from him than Gene. I think he was way more open to 70s type grindhouse movies or political thrillers or historical dramas. And I just always felt like Siskel, while kind of unpopular with certain genres, really just nailed it with what he was feeling then and there and didn't hold back. While Richard, I kind of got a lot of inconsistency. And once again, by no means do I think he's an awful person or anything. I think he's actually very lovely to actually, whenever I've seen him, when he was on Aisha Tyler's Girl on Guide podcast to talk about the passing of Roger Ebert, he really opened up. It was like a Howard Stern type interview where you're just like, whoa, I saw a different side of Richard there. I didn't know he was that emotional, and that down to earth, he kind of, when actually seeing in the taping, I didn't know if he was just kind of more of a speaker versus a persona. Because I think he was more just about getting the review out of the way. But my issue was I kind of got no consistency from him. Sometimes I would see him praise over the top blockbusters that I thought he would otherwise dislike. While Ebert, I got more emphasis on, hey, nothing personal. I generally just don't like any movies that have this actor or actress in them. They just, Ebert was very forthcoming when he thought one award-winning actress was being too melodramatic, or someone like Van Damme or a Rob Schneider type comedian, where he was just like, yeah, they got nice. The result is the same as last time. I'm not the audience for your movie.
Absolutely.
Do you think anyone will maybe try and recreate a similar show maybe in the future? Not that it could be, but
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, like, if you look at the sort of online world, there's people that are doing, creative similar things. I think mainly I really appreciate watching the Red Letter Media guys.
They'll do that. Other people will be like 5 popcorns out of 10.
Yeah. And I mean, the only thing the Red Letter Media guys, they're kind of very genre, they'll only do genre films, so I it would be kind of cool if somebody tried to redo it, but I really don't know how.
It's like they want more of that, but at the same time, how can you find another Ebert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how important criticism is anymore.
Everyone's looking at the tomato meter nowadays and going instantly to the audience score, which is like 70% on a 40% reviewed movie.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of sort of
yeah. I mean, the 30% difference coming from.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of really like how our society in general works nowadays. It's just really quick hits. I mean, if you look at the popularity of like TikTok, it's like people want
TikTok is taking over. Yeah,
very, very quick ingestion of information. And like you said, the tomato meter is an instant, and I do it. If I'm
even when we don't want to, we just see it on every other site. It's often you'll see it. I mean, even on IMDb next to the Metacritic score.
Yeah. I mean, the only time that I won't, I mean, like if I see a movie that's, on IMDb and it's got like a 4, if it's a horror movie, I'm like, well, that's pretty good for a horror movie. It's, I'll watch that one.
It's a fair score. And people are now, it seems like, flocking to Letterboxd, seeing what they can do on there. And that's kind of more for a just blunt, like first impression kind of deal. It's like, movie might require more acid, movie might require a bunch of potato chips and a Happy Meal.
Yeah, but I mean, but the other thing there is you have to sort of find that community. And there's some great voices there, but if you don't know they're out there, there's no way for you to listen.
It's true.
It does take a while to build up all that following. I don't really know who's going to probably get there if, since Google's making it harder to actually make a living doing that. So you got to find probably other people who just want to actually just make that be a fun hobby, probably.
Yeah.
If there's any other particular reviews that kind of stand out, I think he just sounded off. It's a dog movie. Ebert did.
Sorry about that.
No, all good.
I'm trying to remember if there's anything that I've watched within the last couple months that jumped out as me as being like a really good, a really good review. I do know overall, Sully, you had mentioned their year-end specials, which I've really gotten a big kick out of watching when I can find what's either been posted on the SiskelEbert.org site or on YouTube. And I think like their year-end specials were really good, and also, their best and worst of the year as well. It's probably some of my favorite, but I don't really have anything off the top of my head that rings out as one of the better review exchanges that I've seen from them. But that's the other thing, is it doesn't matter what the movie was. You could always, or at least I can always, enjoy listening to them talk about it, even if it's like a period piece I have no interest in.
Yeah. I just love just when they never seemed, like you say, under pressure on how much money or critical attention the movie's getting. They were just they just always put that to the side. I loved how in his review of Tears of the Sun, he notes the dialogue in this is not good, but its intent is explicitly well done.
Yeah.
He would always go through a film's shortcomings. He would note how there's movies that have moments that he believes are meant to be goofy, but are up for debate, but don't distract for the overall entertainment value. When he would take on all kinds of comedies and other bizarre movies. If you look at their review for A Shock to the System, there are movies where he just flat out fesses up, hey, this is a movie that's kind of an acting piece. So this is the reason to look for this. When he goes after something like a Tremors or even a Congo type blockbuster, he's mainly just kind of deciphering kind of what we kind of do now, where it's like, are the effects serving the fun or are they distracting from an inherently silly plot? It's
right.
But I don't think as many people can do that nowadays. I think we're in too much of a trailer wrecks it for everybody kind of mode, where people will look at a trailer, and if it's got awful CGI or just meme worthy moments, a movie's dead on arrival kind of now.
Mm-hmm.
Some films.
And absolutely. And you were mentioning in the booklet that he did for The Rock. I know John owns that. I loved how he did that also with other blockbusters that really didn't get seen all that much. And you could tell when he was like at like live screenings of it, he was just like, why did this movie just pass through, audiences? Why have more people not seen it? I know he did it with Dark City, and I think he's in a commentary track even.
Yep, there is one for that.
There you go. And there's other movies where he would just kind of remind people, I'm not here to be a vocal opponent of this film. I just fail to see what made people get all stirred up about it. He would talk about shocking plot twists. Obviously, people go instantly to negative reviews of his like Die Hard and Usual Suspects, but most people just leave out the part where if you go to the end of it, he's deciphering clearly why it didn't appeal to him. Like he just feels there's not enough of the stuff he wants to see in the former, and in the latter, he's kind of like how every other audience member might be with an M. Night Shyamalan or Christopher Nolan type blockbuster, where he's just like, yeah, the devil's in the details, but I'm not buying any of the detail. And movies like Gladiator, he would often just say, just straight up, hey, this movie's going to find an audience, but it's just reminding me of way better movies that it's inspired by, like Ben-Hur. And I think that's a rare thing too. We see so many people who are kind of like, you gotta love this, and there'll be a bunch of people in line who go, well, it's kind of a retread of this better blockbuster.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It just was such a joy to just see him kind of early in the morning, just discuss what was currently playing. And sometimes he would kind of give a friendly reminder of, where you could see it. If it was a very low budget movie that was probably going to last 2 more weeks in theaters before hitting video stores.
Yeah. I think ultimately that, 40 years worth of film history would be different if we didn't have their critical voices broadcast into millions of homes. It's interesting. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the net result is that they had a positive impact on, how people experienced film.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can recreate it.
Well, they tried to, but it may not be as successful as they were.
There's a bit of that. It just seems like every other person just seems to kind of want to, if they don't want to be a clone of a clone, then maybe they just want to just get caught up in just, like you say, just kind of just technobabble and just stuff that's too debatable for the sake of debate, which kind of takes out the fun in actually just embracing an actual review. Like, because when I used to see film history books, you'd get like a dozen different opinions, but they got their point across right, which was, hey, here's where this is in terms of like ranking, stature, intent, and just overall pop cultural appeal. Or did this sell Happy Meals? Was this mentioned at like a sports stadium because of how influential a movie it is? What kind of a movie is it? And it's kind of a lost portion of a review. A lot of people are just too focused on, I mean, they're good in that they'll sum up, this is worth a rental versus a low budget buy. But now I think we're a little past that. I think now everyone's just getting mainly into the fold of what kind of a movie is it? Is it, especially post streaming, is this a, watch on Sunday kind of movie, or is this a $5 theater visit?
Absolutely.
Movies are not getting any cheaper. So I think now everyone's kind of going into, can I afford it? And am I going to regret it? Which unfortunately still has a bit of a negative context to it. I guess we're just getting picky as a society.
Oh, absolutely.
Are there any other critics that you think have really actually done a good job of recreating his strategy? I kind of missed it when comedian Aisha Tyler would fill in for him on occasion with Rupert. I know Jeremy Johns kind of has a YouTube channel, and he kind of goes for just kind of goofy straight man at times. But
that's usually what he goes for,
Yeah, I mean the main ones, like I mentioned, those the two red
letter guys,
media guys. But like I said, they're more genre based. I don't really seek out people's. I mean, there were 2 websites that were pretty big at one point, and they've both fallen off for various reasons. The first, of course, was like Ain't It Cool News, which I think for a period of time, there would be certain voices.
Harry Knowles was definitely going for that, and then
yeah, but I mean, you had people there like Nordling and Quint. And you'd read their reviews and or at least search out their reviews. And then the AV Club had guys like Nathan Rabin, and then I know ownership over at the AV Club changed, and they sort of cleaned house, and now their reviews don't really matter as much anymore. So, yeah, and right now there's like again, as sad as it seems, I'll just look at the IMDb rating or the Rotten Tomato the meter and decide whether, or even more so, word of mouth. What if a friend recommends it, or doesn't recommend it. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, so like. Sadly, I'm past the point of like wasting my time on a movie if everybody's telling me it's no good. That's not something I need to learn for myself.
Absolutely. We kind of
the whole time.
Yeah, we've gotten to that point where it's like, okay, well, I value my time.
This was really cool. I appreciate you bringing me on to talk about Siskel and Ebert. Again, they hold a special heart in my place in my cinematic sort of cinematic heart.
Absolutely. It's just so aggravating when you read reviews, but no one seems to know how to communicate what they love. And I hope we can keep talking about various cult movies and shows that people forgot, but it's more than just oh my God, people will just see the promo, but not actually listen to the episode. I hope people can listen to the discussion. If anyone wants to see any more Siskel and Ebert interviews, they used to be on abc.com back in like the 2000s.
That's how I watched them, actually.
There you go. There you can find plenty of YouTube clips. Do you recall a blooper reel that used to go out where it seemed like behind the scenes, like outtakes that had leaked, like they were kind of cursing each other out behind the scenes?
That's still on YouTube, I think.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It's still on there.
I think they included that as part of one of their year-end specials once too. But again, there's a site I found recently. It's siskelebert.org, which is a pretty good resource for information about the show and episodes of the show as well.
Very nice.
He usually uploads like obscure episodes that you don't normally see on YouTube.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
Very neat. For those who have been listening, thank you. We appreciate it. And thank you, Craig, for adding extra detail. Is there anything you'd like to promote?
No, you had mentioned up front the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network, and there's lots of great shows on that network there. So if you click on it, I'm sure you're going to find an episode that's going to appeal to what you want to listen to.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, there's something for everybody. Again, I liked it when it was originally, the Stallone network, and you guys were, you had Doug Greenberg of the Rocky Minute, and then Ryan Rebalkin, who is a total stud. He knows his trivia in and out, and I love what he's doing with his Rambo podcast. But it's also just interesting how when you would all tackle the inevitable underseen sleeper hits and infamous movies of Sly, it was a matter of, okay, so what can we do to fix this movie, to make it be less talky, less preachy, less goofy? And it wasn't easy, because some of these movies were just like, this was when he was at the height of his ego versus when he was, dwindling down. And there's some that I still actually like to re-listen to because they're just a fun sit down, and I'm learning all trivia that I generally won't get from even just an IMDb glimpse.
Oh, cool. That's good to hear.
And I applaud you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Anytime. John, any other closing statements you'd like to make?
No, like we said, Siskel and Ebert's one that I managed to respect over the years, and I've actually grown more fond of Siskel and Ebert than Ebert and Roper, and I've always cherished them as film critics, and will continue to do so.
We're kind of missing that. Critics that we can cherish. Actually just register in, you earned it. You weren't just the first tabloid guy they hired. Because, I'll see some other people who will share articles from, Slant or Slate, where the whole point is to basically kind of do an expose, do a bash of something. And it kind of takes out the point when, like you mentioned earlier, Craig, there's no suspense. You're invested, and then the rating hits you, and you're like, whoa, how'd I get there? I want to reread it again because it was so well worded. And I wonder how we got to this end of the tunnel, and it got whatever rating. And when you already kind of just show your hand, your sleight of hand up front, it's kind of like, well, what do they like?
That's what I say.
Well, okay, well, we will do another fun sit down one of these days.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up